Good evening. It's 5 o'clock in the work session. I think it's 5 o'clock here.
Everywhere.
With no margaritas. And,
margaritas. Thank you.
Mr. Kesker, are we live?
Yes, sir.
Good deal. I will now entertain a motion to get this thing kicked off.
Mr. Mayor. Oh, but sorry. I move to approve the work session regular meeting agendas as presented.
A motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second. You see, Alice, it's not always me.
Thank you for that.
But
Mr. Kesker.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowwood.
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. And that brings us to the first topic of business tonight, the discussion of Valley Area Community Support Incorporated, Valley Supportive Housing. Ms. Kaufman.
Actually, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. I'm here. I'm virtual tonight. I'm going to actually walk through this item for you all. And if I don't see him, but hopefully that Charlie Haney and Rebecca Joyce are also in the audience tonight.
They are.
Okay. So I'll just do a quick brief introduction of where we were a month ago and where we are now, and then I'll open the floor to questions. And I see that Mr. Siegel is there with his board vice chair as well. So when we last met on August 24th, the discussion was around their tax exempt request. And after that discussion at that work session, council directed staff to return with some possible solutions and to work with Valley Supportive Housing to work through some other solutions. So this evening is just a discussion. There's no public hearing scheduled. And this is again a discussion and hopefully to get some guidance for the future. So I attached all the information that was in the memo from August 24th, but also I'll just go through what we've done since then. Last week, myself and Rebecca Joyce met with Mr. Siegel and his board vice chair, and in your packet is a list of options and recommendations that were discussed during that meeting that Ms. Joyce had put together. I thought she did a great job doing that. I thought we had a good discussion. There were also a few other questions that I asked Mr. Haney to research, just so we have all the numbers correct. So as far as the back 3 years of taxes, which is all he can legally collect on all the VSH properties, that's approximately $69,783. The current amount owed on the recently purchased St. Clair properties in the lower portion of Pump Street is $15,597. So the total is just above $85,000. There were also some questions about other housing nonprofits in the city of Staunton. And I sent those to you as well in the memo, showing the links that they are tax exempt directly through the state code sections that you were sent. And Mr. Haney, of course, can answer any questions about those. We also provided some information on other properties that serve specific populations, such as the elderly, such as nursing homes or the disabled. And so I included several examples of those, such as the Legacy, Brookdale, etc., the Hilltop, and all of those are taxable as well. In the city of Charlottesville, Piedmont Housing Alliance controls 13 properties that serve the elderly disabled, and they are taxable as well. And also Virginia Supportive Housing, this question came up during our meeting. I asked Mr. Haney to do a sampling of those properties, and those are also all taxable, and they have a very similar mission to Valley Supportive Housing. So again, I'm just going to reiterate that this is an unusual situation. It's very difficult. It's really unfortunate. None of us were here when this happened. All of us wish there were paperwork that supported whatever decision was made at the time. But now we're looking to have this corrected in some form. And I think you can tell that many, when Mr. Haney and myself were looking around at various jurisdictions, they're not going the tax exempt route in these types of cases. They're going through a budget grant or something like that, where the agency can work through the budget process. So there's a couple of different options in front of you. Of course, if you do want to consider the tax exempt option, that would require a public hearing. If you want to consider financially assisting Valley supportive housing in some combination or manner, that would just require a budget appropriation, which I've talked to Ms. Moyers about, and we could probably very likely tack that on to year end as part of carryover, which you'll hear about next. And then VHS can apply for city funds through a normal budget cycle. I've already asked Ms. Moyers to add Mr. Siegel to that list. So in early December, he'll receive an email asking for a budget submission request. And with that, I will open the floor to questions and discussion. So.
Leslie.
Yes, sir.
Could you said some, I mean, of those areas that you looked at, Charlottesville, some different ones, do they go the route of budgeting some money in to sort of help the agency pay for those taxes? Or, I mean, I'm just curious what other areas around the state do go that route.
I think Mr. Haney did a little bit more research than I did. I know when we were in Charlottesville, tax exemption was never an option that was offered. So the agency would go through the budget process. And Mr. Haney, I believe, found that when he talked to different folks in the area, that they also didn't do that they would encourage these agencies to go through the budget process as well, rather than granting them tax exemption, because it's an unusual ask for this agency to be tax exempt, I think, as we've demonstrated through the research that we've done. So I don't know if he's there and he can talk to that a little bit more.
He is. I just want to make sure I understand, but you said they don't do that either. So in other words, none of these jurisdictions are granting relief per se, but they going through the budget process. The same thing is basically us saying, we look at this, we're going to try to, give you some kind of allocate some funds to help you pay such.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right.
And I saw Mr. Haney there, so maybe you can add to that as well.
All right, Charlie, step up there.
Those of the jurisdictions I checked around, right? So no one's allowing a tax exemption for these properties. I talked to Augusta County. They encourage people to go the budget route. I think they have some people that have tried to go the route that we had suggested was a possibility, which is the code section where you get the governing body to grant exemptions. So they've been dissuaded from doing that, is my understanding, but asked to go to the budget through the budget process. I don't know particularly whether they've actually granted money, but what I found from everybody, Albemarle, Charlottesville, Augusta, I didn't get much from Rockingham and Harrisonburg, I believe, as well. They all go the budget route. So that answer your question?
I don't want to hog in it. Leslie or Charlie, would it be possible, and maybe y'all already do, you can help me on this. Are there grants through the state? Are y'all applying for grants that may be additive on top of everything?
Yes, we do.
Can Mr. Siegel go to the podium, please? I can't hear him. Thank you.
Given our budget, which doesn't include property taxes at this point, 75% of our budget is covered by the rents, and 25% is covered by what you might consider local grants, local and statewide grants from United Way, from Capsol out of Waynesboro, from Community Foundation, Central Blue Ridge, and by donations from about 125 local donors.
Okay.
So we're also financed by Virginia Housing for one of our properties, and by the Department of Housing and Community Development by another, and then by a local commercial bank for 3 other properties. So we just don't sit on our hands. We're out there looking for things.
Mr. Siegel, I understand that you met with Ms. Beauregard and Mr. Haney. No, I'm sorry.
Miss Joyce.
Ms. Joyce, discussing other opportunities for resources, financial resources to.
Well,
was that helpful?
There had about 5 suggestions, 3 of which we're already using.
Okay.
Or maybe 4. And the only one that we're not using, there were 5 suggestions. We're using 4, and only one was this
budget process.
Budget project from the general fund.
Right.
Okay, that's so.
So if we could just clarify the actual sum, this is what we went over at the last session. I'm looking at this page from our packet, and it's a list of all the properties that you all that you all own, and I'm seeing a figure of $33,520. That would be per year. Is that a correct?
That's correct.
Number? Okay, and so this is the amount currently. I know you had spoken of adding some properties, but currently this is what you would need additionally each year to make your budget.
That's correct.
So this is what we're looking at.
Does that include the St. Clair properties?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's right here in the.
How many units are you're looking at? Not homes, but little efficiency apartments. How many are you looking at that you have now?
68.
68, and how many more will be added with St. Clair?
No, that's including St. Clair.
68.
That's total. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Have you looked at possibly going through a HUD? Wouldn't you qualify for some funds there? I know there's a lot of paperwork that you would have to do, but I know, and this budget's already spoken for this year, but isn't there some possibilities that you could get some HUD money?
Are you talking about the city HUD grant? We have used it in the past.
They said you had. I mean, yeah, I'd heard
relative to repair of homes, a home in the historic district, but I don't think it's
not reliable, or
I don't think it's available for this kind of thing.
Well, I was kind of under the impression that it's just a lot of paperwork that you have to fill out, to a lot of forms and stuff and hoops you have to jump through. But I talked a little bit to Billy about it today, and he said that you hadn't applied in the last 2 years, but that it's a lot of paperwork to do. But
well, we applied this year, and apparently, from my understanding, we applied a week late. But I sent it to both Billy and Miss Joyce. No one came back and said, we're not accepting this. What they did say was, this gets taken up in the fall. And I may have this wrong, but that's my understanding.
There's a new budget. It's probably what it is the budget. We start work on the budget this October.
That's probably it.
Maybe it would be helpful, because we're looking at a sum of $33,520. And I think Leslie had just mentioned that Jesse's here to talk about some carryover, which I think you're going to be discussing later on. And that is a pretty big number. Maybe we could sort of talk about the budget. It seems like the only option here, if we don't go with making them, granting them tax exempt status, which is something I think we ought to discuss, because this is what they're asking for. And so I think these were the 2 routes that staff had brought back to us, is do we grant them tax exempt status, or do we talk about finding money in the budget, or do we just say sorry, no. And I don't think anybody, yeah, go ahead, Leslie. I don't think
I'm
anybody.
sorry. Let me just clarify. So it's not
Okay,
just, so
good.
the 33,000 correct is, I guess, generally annually what they would pay, but there's the back taxes,
Yeah.
which is about 85, and the current taxes, which are currently owed, which that equals over $85,000.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things to think about there. It's not just going forward, it's going backward as well.
All right. Thank you, Leslie.
I'd like to address some of those, but let me just say that Ms. Cianciolo here is our vice chair, and she wanted to make a statement also, if that's entirely possible here.
Sure. Certainly, go ahead.
So I'm Elizabeth Cianciolo, and I'm proud of being the vice chair of Valley Supportive Housing. I'm also proud to be a member of this community. Being with Valley Supportive Housing, I realize how generous Staunton and Augusta County are and how much we care about the people here. When I was here at the last work session, and when I left here, I was left with the impression that there really aren't many tax exempt statuses given. And since then, I discovered that actually, there's a number of tax exemptions that organizations have gotten, many through churches, affiliations, state, local. But there's a dozen nonprofits on here. And so I realized that it is a possibility. And I looked over this code by Virginia State Legislature and the criteria they kind of put forth in terms of being eligible to apply for exemption. And there were 8, and you all have a copy of this. I'm not going to read it to you unless you want me to.
The code.
Yeah, I think you probably don't. Anyway, we check all these boxes. And I'm thinking about we also provided you with 2 studies. We could provide you with more about how much the city has saved each time we provide a home to someone on the street. And a minimum estimate is $4,000. And that's not hard to come up with when you consider emergency services, police, shelters, food banks. So I look at this and I look at the numbers and I think we may not be putting $33,000. We may be taking that out of your budget each year. But we're saving the city $278,000 each year. So, this was done erroneously, evidently. When we started out, we were the charitable arm of VASI, so we actually were part of the state, but that changed. It seems the city's done just fine without our taxes. You look around at other areas, homelessness is a growing problem.
Did you pass that list around, Elizabeth?
Well, I've made some terrible marks on it, but that's okay. Yeah, it starts here and then on the back is just kind of.
If that's the state code section, that is in their packet.
That's
is that the categories?
That's her list.
Oh, that's her.
It's a list of agencies that are tax exempt. The value of the property and the cost of the exemption is on the back.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you go to a lot of other cities and you see the homeless on the streets.
We do.
We have, so we've always been on a shoestring budget. the first year I was on the board, I met with Dan Lehman and I showed him, and change makers had just come into play. And I pulled out our year-end budget, and I think we came out in the black just under $100. And he said, and we only had 21 apartments then. And he laughed. He said, "This is the most efficient nonprofit I've ever seen." Lou has done great things getting us other funding. We're not interested right now in growing. What we're interested in is partnering with other nonprofits to help our tenants become more productive. There's one nonprofit that is working with homeless for employment skills. I don't think any of our tenants are going to be full-time employment material. What I do think is that they could subsidize their income and have a better quality of life. We want to partner with New Directions, that we're really excited about this, and the artist transitions. So New Directions would take a family who has graduated from their shelter and then we're faced with 2-bedroom apartments, which we haven't had before because our tenants generally don't live well with other people. So we would provide these units for the New Directions for victims of domestic violence. Artist transitions would work with them on job skills, budgeting, transportation, up to 2 full years. So at the end of those 2 years, and at the time they'd come in fully dependent, and then they get less and less support. So at the end of 2 years, they're out on their own. I think that's really exciting because it's those kinds of skills and housing that keep domestic violence victims from returning. So I think the fact that the city benefits by $278,000 at a minimum, that doesn't just say that we're doing the city a service. It says we're making the city a safer place. So that's really all I want. I think tax exemption is a reasonable thing to ask. We have fought our way through from the beginning to be viable. And if we don't get it, we'll scramble. We're a working board. But I think it's a reasonable request. That's it.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mr. Haney, could you come back to the mic, please? The comment was made that checked all the blocks, and you're saying yet they're not tax exempt. What is the point that's holding us up if they claim they have checked all the boxes and they've passed all the criteria to be tax exempt, and yet they're not tax exempt? What is the sticking point?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but they don't fit any of the sections 3606 that are exemptions by classification. So they are not they're not a government service. They're not a church, an educational institution, a burial ground, a museum. You know, there's those 8, and I don't know them all.
Is this something y'all want to work with and get to that point?
Mr. Blair, could you please tell us where this is? Because it's a different.
Sure.
Different place entirely.
Just to give the council an idea.
So Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, he said it correctly.
No, but this is the one.
There's a second section
section.
in the code for taxation that's called, it's not 3606, it's 3651. And it's called property exempt from taxation by classification or designation by ordinance adopted by local governing body on or after January 1st, 2003. So the local governing body has the option of granting tax exemption that was given, that was devolved from the General Assembly in 2003. And I've got it right here if you'd like.
Right here. We have it on our page 14.
Well, let me.
And we checked
now
all, those are the boxes she's referring to.
All right, let me ask Mr. Blair to comment.
So there are two types of tax exemptions granted in Virginia. One is a tax exemption by classification.
Yeah, we have it all right here in our, thank you, Liz.
And one is a tax exemption by designation. And you'll see in your packet, there's 3606. Classification means it's not dependent on the organization or the property owner. If you fit a classification, if you fit that criteria, let's say you're a church, you get the tax exemption. And it's a classification of property in a group. Designation is what's before you. The city council has the authority, and designation means you designate a group for that tax exemption. You designate a nonprofit for the tax exempt designation so long as it meets those criteria. So that's the difference. The classification is just broad. Are you a church? Yes. You fit in the pigeonhole, you get the real estate tax exemption. Designation is a decision you all make as a council for a specific group and their property.
Thank you. Any further questions from council?
And I just want to say, I just want to make sure that this is correct where I'm reading in that first paragraph, Mr. Blair, where it says the nonprofit organization that uses such property for a religious, charitable, patriotic, historical, benevolent, cultural, or public park or playground purposes. That is, those are the purposes for which we would designate.
You would find that a group is one of those.
Was one of those.
Right. And then you look at the 8 factors to determine, do we want to grant this exemption by designation or not?
Because clearly that would be a charitable organization. I mean, I don't think I have to point that out, that's a charitable organization.
I mean, yeah, the Act of 03 makes it entirely up to us.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what you meant when you said check the boxes. So
yeah,
no problem. No problem.
Because there's the two sections, right? It's just making the distinction between those two.
Thank you.
Two statutes. Go ahead.
Further questions?
Mr. Mayor, can I take, I promise no more than 5 minutes.
I'm 5 minutes past the deadline.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah,
I really appreciate it. But
is there something that, because
if you have something very pertinent, a point you want to make, please do so. But I'm already running behind.
Okay. Could you put up that first tenant slide for me? Well, you can't see the whole thing there. This company was set up based on providing a rent that worked with the tenant's income.
We've seen this. We've read your.
You've seen that one.
We've seen
it all.
Okay.
And we're very interested. We're struck with a dilemma. Please understand us. We're taking you very seriously.
Okay, here's the one you haven't seen. So put the second one up, Kyle. Okay. This slide shows, I think someone asked the question last time, when did you buy these properties? This slide shows when we bought the properties. 1314, where we have 18 apartments, was 2007, and then a total of 18 at this point. And you can see the other dates. In 2020, we bought the Pump Street property. We got a real estate tax bill at the end of the year. I went to the assessor and said, here's a tax bill for 6 apartments that we're leasing to those with a designated, with an understood mental health illness. And then we got this commercial area down below. Can we separate them out? No tax for the upper 6 apartments and tax for the commercial area. And the answer was yes. So we paid the taxes, the real estate taxes on the commercial area. The idea of a penalty of some sort in the $35,000 category is just really difficult. We haven't been hiding since 2007. We've been, every year the city had the opportunity to review and tax us on real estate. It just hasn't happened for 17 years. We brought it up that we owe taxes on the commercial area in Pump Street 3 years ago and paid them for the next 2 years through current. And it's like, it's punishment for what? We have conformed with everything the city has asked for. And the idea of this penalty, running this tax bill up to $85,000 is just really difficult to understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
But I asked the question this week to Ms. Joyce, does the city have a policy on homelessness? And the answer is no, we really don't. If you look at our 68, if you look at the 80 to 100 residents of Valley Mission, I go to a meeting once a month where we count up the homeless in the chronic, veteran, and juvenile range, and that usually is close to 100. And there's overlap, but there's a big problem out there. There's a homeless problem. Ms. Cianciolo referred to it. It's national in scope. If the council decided they want to set up a commission of some sort to study this so that you could become more knowledgeable, we would be glad to cooperate and help do that and bring information to the council.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good.
So, go ahead. Leslie, were you saying something?
I'm just wondering what the desire of council is going forward.
It seems like, guys, it seems like we have to make 2 decisions. And one is, first off, is there a discussion? I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, discussion about the $85,000. If I may, I would like to say that I don't think that they should have to pay the PAC taxes on the 3 years that, they didn't know about. And I think that is, would be seen as a punishment, as Mr. Siegel said.
I agree. I mean, since, did we say 2006, they've been operating as tax exempt within the city, and doing a lot of good work in our city for a population that is in need of a lot of help here. So I think that we've managed to go forward without that income. And so yes, I know we're kind of going into that. Right. But looking at that list, I think they're at least as deserving as many that are already tax exempt.
I personally agree with that too. I don't think that we should make them pay back taxes, but the tax exempt is really hard. I mean, I think that that's something that we, I would much rather try to find another way to get them money than to do the tax exempt, because then it opens us up for a bunch of other people that might want to be tax exempt also.
Is there a way that we can do it that they could depend on it in their budget? It's really hard to roll forward hoping for a grant that you don't know you're going to get.
It's true.
Can we just maybe could we make a decision on one and then go toward to the other?
Well, on the one, I absolutely agree with
other.
Others that I think this is a blindside hit for them, and I would like us to find a way to delete that amount.
I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement with that because I feel that they operated as tax exempt and they didn't know. That's a mistake that the city made and we have to clean it up. So I don't think that we should put
All right,
that
are we
on
in
them
agreement
to
that
pay.
the back taxes will be
Yes.
dropped?
Yeah.
Yes.
We will arrange.
To me, that's
But that
common
would be,
sense.
well, we can't call it getting rid of taxes, but we have to add
We'll have
that,
to
as
have Ms.
Leslie's pointed out.
Beauregard
Yes.
come up with a method of
Find a
handling
way.
that. But as far as granting the tax exempt status on the property in the future.
My gut is, I mean, I'm, as much as I want to help, I personally think we're going down a rabbit hole.
So do I.
So we just looked at a list of organizations that don't pay taxes. For example, the R.R. Smith Center, the Shakespeare Center. I wonder how these organizations are tax exempt while others are not, because then what it leaves us open to is picking and choosing. Because I imagine I've been on council for 6 months and this happens. So I imagine this is not going to be the first nonprofit that would come to council asking for tax exempt status. And so how would we pick and choose within this list of cultural, benevolent, historical, patriotic organizations? And at what point do you make that decision?
Mr. Blair, is that a matter of classification?
I think we would have to research those specifics to determine if they were classification or designation.
So making it go through the budget process, finding $35,000 every year to designate toward VSH to pay taxes would depend on each council moving forward. And so if there's an entirely different council in 4 years, they may not want to designate that amount of money. So that is a variable in their budget, whereas tax exemption is a constant.
Would they be able to come back and ask again?
Yes.
They would have to.
Yes.
Process.
They'd have to go through every year.
Okay, but what I'm saying, would they, Valley Supportive Housing, be able to come back and ask for tax exemption again? Or this is the one time and they can't ask again? I mean, if we don't today decide, no, we're not going to go that route, would they be able to come back in, let's say, a couple of years to a future council and ask them to make that decision?
You asking me a question?
No, I'm talking to Leslie.
Mr. Blair.
Yeah.
Blair.
Well, it's an interesting parliamentary question. I think the answer to your question is this: if you all took a formal vote and said, we do not wish to grant the tax exemption, I think we've gone over this on other issues. There's what's called a motion for reconsideration, but that would have to be at the next meeting. Somebody who voted in the majority would have to then say, let's reconsider. I think barring a reconsideration, you'd have to wait until January of 2025 when a new city council with new members are seated. In terms of the idea of reconsidering that decision. This council could only reconsider it at the very next meeting. But a new council that takes office in 2025 would be able to revisit the proposition of a tax exemption.
Thank you, sir.
So it'd have to be after every election, a decision like that can be revisited.
Right. I mean, the principle is you as a council make a call, then the motion for reconsideration is available. But after that, you have to wait for a new council to reconsider the matter fresh.
It's not saying that we don't want to do anything. It's just that we don't have it. We don't have it all. We don't we don't have everything. So we're looking at the list that you gave us, and we're looking and we're wondering, well, how are they tax exempt? And what makes them distinct from Valley supportive housing? What does, because
we were on that list because when we were created as a charitable arm of Valley Community Services Board. So we were considered part of Valley Community Services Board, which gave us tax exemption through the state because we were part of government. And then later, Valley Community Service Board, while they've always been on our board, they wanted to pull away. And I think that's where the hiccup is, because everyone assumed that we did have tax exemption under the state guidelines until we asked 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, in effect, we're deciding whether to make them tax exempt, whether to make them not tax exempt anymore.
There's no decision to make if they're not tax exempt with under any authority right now.
Right.
So there really isn't a vote to make them not tax exempt. The vote is about making them tax exempt. So the only action would be if you were to appropriate some dollars to help cover their back taxes or future taxes.
Right. And just to respond to what Leslie said, what this would do is it makes us decision makers on what nonprofits are going to get get tax exempt status. And so then we just become decision makers on who can be tax exempt.
Well, we are the decision.
We are the decision makers, but it seems easier. It seems easy.
Dangerous precedent.
Well,
yeah. Well, that list though of the ones that are already tax exempt reflects decisions by this body.
But if
at some point,
it seems neater that we could just make it a financial appropriation. I
don't believe that's true. Actually, I think a lot of those are tax exempt because of the state code sections.
Okay.
I mean, Mr. Haney can speak more to that, but I'm not aware of any decisions, at least in the past 10 years, where councils made a decision to make a nonprofit tax exempt.
Yeah, Terry's never done it. Yeah.
May I have 90 seconds? You can get the hook and pull me off this thing. Kylie, could you put that slide back up that shows tenant income? This is the one, Mr. Mayor, where you said you've seen it before, but I've added some things to it. And not that one, the other one. Okay, stop right there. You're looking at what we're asking for as a property. We're looking at it from the standpoint of the tenant. We have a tenant that gets $829 a month, maybe another $35 for his SNAP benefits. And when you take out our $525, all expenses included, out of that, you're down to a net of, you got to go a little higher, Kylie, of $339. Now, the tenant's other expenses, I stuck in $150 for food for the month. You and I look at this $829 income and cannot understand it, can't fathom it really. We're looking at it from the standpoint of this tenant. Okay, so if you knock out the $150 for food, you're down to another net of $189 lasting the rest of the month for whatever other expenses. You know, they don't buy life insurance. They don't buy car insurance. Only 2 of our tenants have a car. They're after medications. They're after transit. Just think of the things that you and I spend money on that they cannot spend money on. We looked at what it would take to add a certain number of dollars to all the rents to pay for the real estate taxes. And it's about $41. So if you take $41 out of 189, you're down to $148 for a human being to spend on anything else except food. So we're looking at it from the standpoint, we're dealing with human beings that have an unfortunate lifestyle.
We agree to that, Mr. Siegel. Thank you very much for your comments.
Wait.
Was that 90 seconds? You know?
And clearly, I mean, clearly Valley is an important organization in our community and doing very good work. And I think helping them in any way financially, whether it is through tax exempt status or through a budget allocation, is an investment in our community. I think they're right in saying that we save money by investing in their organization. And it just comes down to how we plan to do it. I don't think anyone wants to not help.
Correct.
So it's deciding which way to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are
really
way
late.
behind. Thank you all.
You're in carryover.
Mayor Claffey?
We make a decision?
No. I'm just going to make a suggestion because I know we're about to hear about the carryover. Can I suggest that one of the items be moved to into the regular agenda for the sake of time?
Depends on what
it depends on what it is. The discussion of revisions to City Council Procedure Memorandum number 13.
Okay.
Yep.
You want to do that because that's just Ms. Kaufman's item. So we can put that at the very end if that's okay with you all.
It would come number I.
Yeah, is that okay, Mr. Blair? How I just did that?
Sure. I mean, I think if there's unanimous consent from council, it can be I.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll make that I. So
very good. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I'll introduce Jesse Moyers. We'll talk about the very preliminary FY23 year-end carryover.
Welcome, and you're allowed to talk fast.
It's a good thing I'm a nervous speaker, so I do talk fast.
That's fine. Thank you. Be patient.
Okay, so we're still in the process of closing out 2023, but we wanted to get in front of you with some of the numbers, kind of like we did last September with the 22 results. These numbers are preliminary, so they could change, but hopefully not significantly. The 23 results are not considered final until the audit is complete and the auditors have signed off on the annual comprehensive financial report, which is usually about early December. I'm going to run through the top 8 budget variances, 7 of which are in the revenue category, and 1 is an expenditure line. And these are starting in descending order. And up first is real estate taxes. So real estate taxes, when compared to the 23 budget, are coming in higher. Sorry, Kylie, I forgot I was flipping. Coming in higher compared to budget by $3,465,818. And that is because when the 23 budget is prepared in the spring of 22, we do not know what assessments are. We do not know what the rate's going to be. So we budget based on what we have at the time. So when assessments came in much higher in January, we did reduce this rate by 2 cents, but we did not equalize. And that is the difference for the 23 budget.
Right.
So for the 24 budget, you won't see that because the 24 budget was prepared based on the current assessments and the rate of 89 cents. So personal property, we exceeded budget by $1,311,226. And this was due to the increase in the vehicle values caused by supply chain issues following the global pandemic. In 24, we did increase the budget by $450,000. But we wanted to allow room for the vehicle values to normalize, which they did. When the numbers were ran for the 2023 billing, the values did decrease, which is going to result in a reduction of revenue of $850,000. So between that and how much we raised the budget by, personal property taxes for 24 should come in right at budget. Maybe a little more, but pretty much right at budget. So the first 2 items are pretty big items, but we don't expect them to repeat for 24. Meals tax. Meals tax exceeded budget by $895,735. This is due to the local economy performing better than we expected coming out of the pandemic. We increased the 24 budget by $627,000. We allowed for a slight economic slowdown while preparing the 24 budget. This is a slide that just summarizes the historical results for the meals. You can see we did do $1 million increase in 23, and then this year was another 627,000. Business license will exceed budget by 788,125. The 24 budget was increased by 300,000. Once again, the common theme with the ones that are based on the economic based revenues is that we did not want to be overly aggressive, but to increase the budget sum to help decrease the variance at the end of 24, but to also allow room for the economic slowdown that's being predicted, although we don't know if or when it will happen this year. Sales tax, same kind of thing, 687,604 above budget. The FY24 budget was raised by $350,000. There's a slide in here that shows the historical results. You can see we expected the sales tax revenue to decrease sharply following the pandemic in the FY21. It just did not happen. It has been increasing ever since. And while we have increased the 24 budget by 350,000, there is still room for economic slowdown there as well.
Significant slowdown could be before you would make a difference.
Don't say significant.
Not wood.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing today that we're back to talking about a soft landing. And I mean, you're increasing. I see that, but you're increasing by half.
Yeah.
What you have, instead of taking it as we're going to repeat. We're only acknowledging 50% of our increases.
That is true. And you'll see why here in a couple slides.
All right.
The lodging tax exceeded budget by 324,457. We increased budget by 382. This may end up being a lofty goal. We ended the year at 1,292,000. So in order to even make budget for FY23, we'll need to grow lodging tax revenues by 5%. And that is because of you see the June 23 revenues there, that is a 25% decrease from June the year before. I was not expecting that. And so that's why you don't really see the cushion there that you saw in the sales tax and the meals tax.
Why was that? Is there any explanation?
I have no idea. That's confidential information that I don't get to see.
Because I mean, Tourism Advisory Board was aware of this and they talked about it at their meeting, and they pretty much had a bad month of June.
And they didn't have a reason or
because
explanation.
Schools are going later and people aren't traveling as much. And yeah, people aren't traveling in June as much, I think.
And it looks like last June might have just been
an
anomaly. I mean,
it was high.
It was. The last revenue category is the health fund transfer. That's a negative variance. And I just wanted to point it out because it offsets some of what I just talked about. We had budgeted to use a $400,000 transfer of funds from the health fund to the general fund in FY23. We will not be doing that because we don't need to do that. And the health fund really can't sustain that. So that's going to be zero actual revenue. So that's a negative impact. And we did not have one of those in the 24 budget. So just want to point that out.
Okay.
So on the expenditure side, salaries and benefits added all together across the entire general fund are going to be favorable to budget by $1.3 million. And this is due to open positions across the organization. Major offices with open positions are city manager's office, communications, finance, streets, police, and parks. We expect the gap for this to narrow in 24 as many of these positions have been filled and we start to see some improvements in the labor market. There are still a few departments that are struggling for good qualified applications, and some that are struggling to get any applications at all. In addition, as a reminder, we did budget for $300,000 in attrition savings for the FY24 fiscal year budget to help balance the budget and reduce the carryover figure. That was something new for 24. So with that being said, my goal is not to eliminate carryover completely, but to reduce it to something that is normal. The last few years, and this year included, is not normal. It's very unexpected, especially following a pandemic. We expected sales tax and meals tax to kind of fall off significantly, and they just did not. But it would be in our best interest not to eliminate it because we need to be prepared for unknown expenses, like the storm we had in July in the parks, like last year. That's $500,000 worth of expense that we didn't expect, that we ended up covering out of fund balance. And we've also gotten to the point where we've been funding our CIP out of fund balance just because we have not been able to afford it in the operating budget. And so the goal for me, at least, is to try to get to something a little more normal that provides that cushion for the unknown, but at the same time, it's not these wild carryovers that we've been seeing the last couple of years. And I think that we've made some progress toward that in our FY24 budget. We do have a little room in business license, sales tax, meals tax, that we could increase it some more in the 25 budget. We'll have to just see how 24 performs. And it's just too early. We don't have any of that data yet to see how that's going. And then the last slide is just looking ahead. Brown Edwards, our auditors, will be on site the week of the 9th through the 13th for their audit work. October, November, we continue our audit work and we start working on the ACFR preparation. Early December, the ACFR will be completed. And then we plan to come back to you probably in January with some carryover recommendations and the next budget amendment.
You didn't give me a number.
I know, I'm afraid to.
I'm
I'm gonna make you do the math.
Can negotiate it.
All right, what is it?
Oh, you're gonna make me say it?
Yep.
Oh, it's 8.5.
Oh. And you folks weren't gonna cut taxes. $8.5 million.
Let me just say, we have a courthouse.
Yeah,
to
how much
build,
does the court
okay?
cost?
We have a courthouse to build.
Don't make me go back to my old standard. Tell that to the people that are
I will. I'm saying it right now. I'm saying it right
Yeah.
now. We have a courthouse to build and we don't have to borrow as much money to do it, meaning we don't have to pay interest on bonds that we take out to pay for things in actual time.
And we have the lowest property taxes, over 75%. I do care, you know, because I mean, direct comparison with other municipalities on that. So, I mean, we have so many things we've got to pay for, and it would be just irresponsible to kick it down the road.
I'm pleased to know that we have money.
We can lose ourselves. Yeah. Yeah.
One quick question that I'm just amazed at. What happened with the business licenses with the $788,000 exceeding budget by $788,000? That's a lot of money. Where did that come from?
It is, and we're just not increasing the budget to match the actuals. And Maggie was just a little afraid to go all the way up to what we've actually been bringing in because she thought there would be a decrease in business license because we kind of expect a slowdown, but I mean, it may not happen. I mean,
what kind of businesses, do we know what kind of businesses that these licenses have been issued to?
No, I don't. Maggie would have to answer that.
I would really I'd be curious because
a lot of money.
It is.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. I mean, no.
I was very nervous about tonight.
You don't think I'm going to let you forget it.
I'll never.
I was going to make you do the math.
I've known what the math's coming in at, but I mean.
And I agree. That's huge, but we've made some strides in 24. It's a good problem to have though, because we do have the courthouse, we have West End, we have Uniontown, we have lots of needs, but we'll be talking to you guys over the next few months about where we want to go with that. Of course, we probably do want to leave ourselves a little bit of cushion for unknown stuff. So thank you very much.
Audience that wants to
Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa's here to hear
Yeah, but it's because we're not employed.
procedure.
Hmm?
We don't have
Said a
time to
million
talk about
three
the
of us because
procedure
we're not fully
13, or-
employed.
Right, that we haven't filled all the positions. Yeah.
As I know there's somebody here to,
Melissa Patrick's here
Yeah.
about the naming.
Oh, yeah, she is.
So why don't we just
can we
do that?
get it really fast? There's nothing
right.
really to
Nothing
discuss. We all have
I
to
just
say
hate to make
yes.
her wait.
All right,
Wanna
let
go
us
do
keep,
that?
Yeah,
yeah.
we're doing this just for
Fine.
Melissa.
Understood. I didn't realize Ms. Patrick was in the audience. That's, yep. I'll let Ms. Kaufman take it from here then.
Okay, I want to be pretty brief about this, so I won't walk you through the entire policy right now, but if you want to flip to page 31, that's where the new proposed policy lives. Essentially, staff met after being directed by council earlier this year to discuss updating the naming policy. We had representatives from our office, police, Parks and Rec, Public Works, and Planning. After having some discussions, reviewing other communities' policies and reviewing our existing policy, it was determined that the naming policy, the scope was too large. And so the recommendation was to really split that into 3 separate policies. So the naming of major city assets, that's a policy at hand, a policy on dedications and memorials, which would be separate, and then a policy on sponsorships. So if council is happy with the direction of this policy, staff would be seeking direction to work on the other 2 policies after this. So the existing policy is built upon in the new policy. The new policy clearly defines what can be included in naming of major city assets, and that's really 4 categories: buildings and structures, other property like open spaces and parks, and then public rights of way, including trails and pathways. And then 4th would be public roadways. It also specifically defines what is prohibited in the policy, and those are memorial dedications. As I stated, that is anticipated in a separate policy: public art installations, private building structures, property, historic properties where historic name has already been accepted, and then paid naming rights or marketing sponsorships. Again, that would be a separate policy. So really 3 kind of criteria are proposed as part of this policy: location and community impact, which were already included to an extent in the existing policy. And then historical significance was added as a 3rd criteria. Public roadways were kind of called out separately in that honorary roadway renaming is recommended as part of this policy, but full renaming of a road will only be considered in very special and rare circumstances, just because it's so cost prohibitive and impactful for the community. Guiding principles is a brand new section of this policy. One major difference here is that language has been included for stating that naming should generally not be done for individuals who are still living. And so that is currently allowed, and that is a change here. Staff in the working group felt that this would be better addressed through a dedication or a memorial or a proclamation. But of course, it's not prohibited, so it can still be considered in special circumstances. General procedures are being proposed as part of this policy. So an application has also been developed that needs to be submitted in full. An internal working group from staff will review, ask questions if anything else needs to be submitted, and then from there present it to the city council for consideration. And so you'll see the copy of the actual application attached to this as well. Aside from the basics, we are requesting that maps and pictures of the impacted area are included. Any kind of common usage names are identified. Kind of the bulk of it is a statement on how the proposal meets criteria, including historical documentation, a summary of any public outreach that has been conducted to date, an itemization of any costs that might be anticipated with this change of name. And then for roads only, a petition in support of at least 2/3 of the property owners that directly abut the linear footage of the road. So that is my very, very quick synopsis of this policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council?
Yeah, we had talked about this, about other things, voting on proclamations and things. Do we have to have a full consent, a unanimous vote, or is it a majority if we understand the question?
No.
She's asking if something comes before this procedure, will it be does the whole body a unanimous decision of council or just a majority?
It's a majority vote.
It is, okay.
Yes.
I think the key to the city was a unanimous vote.
Right.
And okay. And naming a place or a street. Unanimous. Okay.
So, and this is also give guidelines in like renaming a street. That's not included in this, right?
Yep, it is included.
It's
just
under
that.
4.
Yep.
Okay, but is that special consideration?
Honorary street renaming, so that's kind of overlaying an existing street with an honorary name, but the existing street name stays. That is proposed for consideration as part of this policy, but full renaming of the streets is discouraged.
Okay.
Yeah, because it could be really financially expensive for
very
the
confusing.
people that live.
Yeah,
on
every business, every house. Yeah.
And it messes up GPS
Oh,
systems,
really?
and Google Maps, and everything else. It's just.
Okay. Sounds good. I think it's great. I really love the guiding principles. I think it
Yes,
just makes it
good
clear.
job.
Cleared up.
It's much more clear. It just gives good guidance on what could be and should be designated or accepted.
I guess there's not going to be a Terry Holmes Boulevard.
There's not going to be a Terry Holmes
No
Boulevard.
boulevard.
And
Not
so,
during your lifetime, buddy.
Come back to us after you've died.
so Ms. Kaufman, this is also, I see the paper version here, but you can go online and do this like the other.
Yeah, we'll get that online. So if everyone's happy with this, we'll get this on a future agenda for approval, and then just seeking direction from you all if you'd like us to work on those additional 2 policies. Yeah,
This looks
I think
good
so.
and
Okay.
concrete. Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Thank
think working on the additional 2 policies would be great, especially if this is how they're going to look. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Patrick, anything that you want to? Come to the microphone though, please.
Thank you very much. And speaking on behalf of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and resolution that we sent in earlier, my question is that the resolution was not to rename anything.
Right.
It was to redesignate the historical basis for the naming. And so I'm not really quite sure how to proceed. I understand the new policy and so forth, but it doesn't really fall under the new policy as you explained it.
What is the request specifically?
The resolution was requesting that the city redesignate Green Street to honor 2 African-American war heroes named Green. And to tell you the truth, after talking to some other military historians, I think we want to recraft that simply because Nathaniel Green was the commander of all the Augusta militia in the Revolution. And so we don't want to take that away from him, but we would like to see the Captain Green and Major Green honored. And it makes sense to us that Green Street should be designated for both of them. And it doesn't cost the city a thing.
Correct. And we don't have to rename it. Yes.
Right.
It's all beneficial.
So.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to let you work that out with Amanda, and
Be happy to.
And let's see what we can do about that. But
Okay.
Thank you for your interest and your
Wonderful. Thank you very
for your
much.
patience and letting us have the time to work through this.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you so much. All right. We are now going to the item 5, which is a report of properties delinquent in property taxes and an overview of the collection process. Good evening. Well,
Yeah. Is Rick there? Okay. There he is.
Okay. How y'all doing this evening?
Wonderful. Wonderful.
How are you?
Rick, pretty good. The information that I provided is the standard stuff that I put together for council on a annual basis for sure.
Right.
And it shows that our collection rates based upon personal property and real estate and how they roll through the years. And it takes a while for those years to be collected as we go forward based upon the collection process. And the collection efforts that I've listed there, you know, I don't have to read all these back over to you.
No.
And because we're trying to roll. I know. I'm trying to get you rolling.
Yes.
Okay?
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And so you know, we do all these things. We have DMV stops. You know, we take income tax refunds and these new governor refunds that are going to be coming out for the I think it's $200 and $400. It makes me really busy at a time when it's going to add extra work for me whenever they come out, because they are by definition in the governor's ordinance subject to the debt set off, which is what we do to help collect personal property. So that will be another boon in helping to collect some additional taxes for personal property on the vehicles. The other thing we've done a lot more of on a systematic basis is the DMV stops. We actually are up through, I think, the V's. It's a manual process of the people that, so if you had a outstanding tax of 2021 or greater tax bill, we've gone to try, and we don't always find the people could have left out of state. That's what I said on the bottom. The toughest thing to collect is people deceased and out of state. And there's the reason we usually they stay on personal property. But that's a manual process. So if you had a 2021 or greater tax bill, older tax bill on personal property, we've gone out, looked up DMV, gone manually in, put on a stop so that you can't do any registration work at the DMV. And so the DMV, and part of that process gives you, when it's time for you to renew, they send you a letter saying, hey, you're not going to be able to renew because you need to check with the city of Staunton because you owe taxes. And that's one of our biggest pieces on that. I didn't know we were going to be running so far behind, but I'll give you something to take back with you. Just the general process of tax collection. And it's just a real quick thing of just says bills are sent out. Then we turn around and this is when we do DMV stops. And I'll talk about the sale process of real estate here next.
Mr. Jones, I'll tell you that I'm the one that requested this to be put on the agenda. And the reason being is my mentor in West Virginia, who I worked for many years ago, has told me a success story that they're having in South Charleston, West Virginia. And they have a regular schedule and they are current on it. And people have come to know and respect the system, knowing that once their taxes become delinquent in the fourth year, it's going to the block. And consequently, it is not as difficult to collect when the whole community understands the system. And I know that COVID came along and threw a wrench in the works, and we all had to back off. But my question is, how many pieces of property in the city of Staunton have delinquent tax bills dating back pre-COVID? 2019 would be 4 years ago.
Probably about, if off the top of my head, the numbers would be probably about, okay, I would probably say about 130 parcels. And they would be at various years in that and in various stages of payment arrangements and things like that we try to work with, because the last thing, you know, if you it's easy to say, yeah, just sell after 4 years, and that's good. And but in the standpoint that
if you have an arrangement worked out with somebody and they're making payments, I have no objection.
Yeah, no, that's
no problem with that. Once you got somebody that's come and talked to you and it's set up a payment plan, you're done.
Right.
My point is, we're going to Sands Anderson. I believe that's the name of the.
Yeah.
I see that you've got some properties picked out to. You have 20 properties picked out to go on October 30th.
I have a minimum of 20 that's going to be picked out. That list hasn't been finalized because I have to send out some. Mailings that are registered, things like that. And I got so there's probably about a 45-day lapse in there to go to Sands Anderson. I can give you the exact list because it'll be public knowledge and say the end of November meeting.
That'd be fun.
That'd be great.
It would give you the exact list of which properties are in Sands Anderson's hands.
Did we do that last year in October?
Last year we did not. The year before we did. But again, we were coming out of COVID. I've been working with certain people's properties going forward. Now, there's a couple properties there that definitely will be on the list. But again, they're individual. You have to look at, from my standpoint, I look at them as each individual, because I go through every single one of them. I check, see if there's water, see if they're abandoned, things like that are going. If you look at, I even put on that list, if you go to for sale at auction, is what we use when we go to sell them. You can see all the different localities and the types of properties that are being sent up for sale at auction from the different localities. I think Waynesboro even had one 2 months ago, something like that. But then they started out with 12 properties and ended up having down to 2. The other ones got redeemed. They couldn't really finish having a sale for just the 2 properties. But my point is that they have a list and you can see how other localities and what type of properties are being sold at auction. And from our standpoint,
my point that I'm trying to make to you is, if you do formalize your process, and I understand that we want to treat everybody in a fair and equitable manner, and we want to have individual contact with every homeowner, but if you have a criterion that is published and established at, like, let's say the 4-year mark, then you don't have to go through as many of the rituals, because the personnel involved know that, boy, if I don't do something by 4 years, it's up.
State code keeps you to have to go through after the 3rd year. So yeah, so that's where it comes into, and that's where we start sending out our notices to get to that point.
Rick, how many of these people, do you know how many of them are elderly or
I don't have a number on that, but I can tell you some of the ones that are further behind do have what you would consider elderly.
But still, Terry, if they're elderly and they're making payments, regular payments, that should not be that's not what I'm talking about.
I got you.
I'm talking about the people that just are not paying taxes on property in the city of Staunton, and they haven't paid for years.
Right.
And we hear about it. And I'm sure everybody up here on this dais has heard about somebody that hadn't paid taxes since 2014. And it comes up in conversation, and we just want to make sure that that's not happening in Staunton. Right. If you've been delinquent on your taxes since 2015 without making a payment, without coming to see you,
right,
we can't have that. But as long as you're dealing with them and you have something worked out, which is going to cover your elderly and your people, that, you know, as long as they're dealing with you, we're happy.
Right.
We just want to make sure that nobody is falling through the cracks and hadn't been paying taxes forever.
Oh, I'm with you. That's what I want to do.
We're trying to help you out,
and I appreciate it.
Trying to get something published or a protocol.
Well,
set
the key will be whenever we do have this next tax sale, and you'll see the list of the properties that are out there. And every time we do it, there's a rush after that thing to people to come in and go, oh yeah, you know what? I'm a year behind. I need to come in. Let's talk. So that is all part of the deal. And so like I said, the last one we had was 2021. We hope to have one in early 2024 now, because.
And can we set that so that would be an annual event?
Yeah, we can try to do that on it. But the thing you have to look at is which ones then become delinquent at that time, because you can't go with 3 pieces of property. You got to make sure that we have it to where you have a good sale auction. So usually we group them up and say, okay, here's 10, whatever we go to make the auction worth the dollars that you're going to do. And because of this process is a long process that goes to Sands Anderson to get them started. It's a 6 month process, depending on what it is. There's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross, but I'm not saying that that's not something to look at a specific time, at a given time. I'm fine with that, but not always is that going to result in a sale of that year, just depending on what the amount of properties that you have that are not making payments, that are, that are in the situation that you're talking about.
But you just mentioned that you had 120 pieces of property that are over 4 years delinquent. And how many of those have payment arrangements made?
Oh, probably about 60 to 70% of those. The ones that aren't making those arrangements, there's a couple, like, again, you have to look at a couple different ways. There, maybe not a payment arrangement, but there's extenuating circumstances why I can't sell some of those properties. Some of them are small parcels. I can't do anything with those. That comes into the number I gave you. There's probably about 30 of those. And then the other part you run into is I've got 2 pieces of property that had an IRS entanglement. So I had to straighten that out before. Now that has been straightened out. Now I can put them on there. Now I can't tell you which ones they are. They're all private information, but know that those type of things are happening on those. So that's why I say it comes back to now I got about 20 couple that don't have any type of arrangement.
Okay.
And it could be, it depends on whether somebody comes up, because they may come up and go, hey, I'm getting ready to sell it. And then they come up and all of a sudden they can come up with some money and it then go to sale, or, a good chunk. It depends on what the situation may be. Again, I try to work one-on-one with people, because the last thing we want to do is to throw somebody out of their houses that are trying to make things right with me. And that's to your point. And I'm glad you made that point, and that if they're working with me and we're making some type of progress, that they're not necessarily going to be displaced.
Right. Any other questions from members of council?
Thank you.
And I can look to come back into November whenever I have that list. I'll be happy. It'll be published, and I'll be happy to talk about it anytime you want.
That'll be great.
So you're thinking about 10 properties before you can actually go to sale?
It's not necessarily number. It's really based upon, it is sort of the number, but it's also based upon the value, what sales size you're going to get, because there's a lot of work that goes into that for Sands Anderson, whoever, to turn around and say, okay, now we've got a sale that's worth putting our time in and having a sale. And, because the auctioneer's got to get paid, there's costs that got to go into those things. So it's not just throw them up there, for 1 or 2 pieces of property that's you're going to sell for $10,000. Right. It's just not going to be worth the time. So we do bundle them. And so some of these I may have had on there that I wanted to do, say, last year or whatever, but they'll be pulled into this year's sale.
Well, thank you. We'll look forward to hearing from you in November.
Okay.
That was great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rick.
No problem.
I'll now entertain a motion.
Mayor Claffey, I move to enter a closed meeting for discussion or consideration of disposition of publicly held real property located at Staunton Crossing, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3, and discussion of the performance of a council-appointed employee, the city attorney, pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A3.
Have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
A second. Terry
Holmes, second. Mr. Kester.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We are in closed session. We will return at 6:59 and come out of closed session. Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. Mr. Kester, are we live? I will now entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
Mayor Claffey, I move that council reconvene in an open meeting and certify to the best of each member's knowledge that only lawfully exempted public business matters were discussed and that only public business matters as identified in the closed meeting motion were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Mayor Claffey, I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Kester.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
At this point, our regular meeting is underway, and the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And tonight's invocation moment of silence will be brought to us by Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor Claffey. I think it's fun to invite someone from the community. And so I have invited a dear friend and former retired Episcopal priest. His name is Roger Bowen. He is standing there ready to say the invocation for us. So thank you, Roger, for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Let's be still together for a moment and put things away. Just be still. Disturb us, Lord, when we're too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams come true because we've dreamed too little, when we arrive safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, when with the abundance of the things we possess, we've lost our thirst for the water of life. So stir us, Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture on wider seas where storms will show your mastery, where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push us into the future in strength and courage and hope, but mostly in love. We pray in the name of our captain, who for some of us is Jesus and others is Allah, others is Buddha, others is Jehovah, others is Elohim, Yahweh. We pray in the name of our captain. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. All right, for the mayor's report tonight, short and simple. It was a rainy weekend, but mischief and magic still went on and in full glory. I want to thank all the associates from Staunton that worked so hard to make this event a positive, and it's really neat to see all the people out and about and enjoying it. So thanks to everybody that had anything to do with mischief and magic, and we look forward to next year. Do I have any additional items by other members of council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to let everyone know, if you don't know this already, Staunton City Schools has a kindness campaign, and this Saturday is a marathon, a Kindness Matters Marathon. If you want to support our students, you can come to Staunton High School. It's from 9 to 11, $25 gets you all of the bling. You can get a bag, a t-shirt, walk for 2 hours with our students and spread some kindness. So you can also find out more just by Googling Staunton Kindness Matters Marathon.
Very cool.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Anyone else?
Well, let's see. Earlier this week, we had our joint meeting, the Staunton, Augusta, Waynesboro Metropolitan Planning Organization, along with Waynesboro and Charlottesville. This was held over at the military school in Waynesboro there, and good presentations about the Crozet Tunnel, upcoming projects. There's tentative talk about a new state park closer in to all of us here as well, just in talks about property on that. So it's just kind of a lot of exciting things going on in the area. And like so many things, it sounds like everything's landing in 2025. So I think we can expect everything to be in flux at that time.
Good deal. Anyone else?
2 weekends ago, that would have been after our last council meeting, was the African American Heritage Culture Multicultural Festival, which kicked off, and it was Saturday was absolutely beautiful, and
yes, it was.
We had a great day that day, but it put a little damper on our Sunday because that is a 2-day festival, and even though it rained, we still was out there, and it was just gorgeous. And they do a fashion show every year, and I was one of the models. So the opportunity, it wasn't a lot attended because it started raining, drizzling, and people started leaving, and some of the vendors didn't stay. But hopefully next year will be bigger and better.
Well, there was quite a crowd down there Saturday morning when I went through. Yes. It was great, great crowd. Yeah. Well done. Anyone else? Any other members of council? All right. Brings us to our consent agenda. And it is policy of City Council to have routine, non-controversial items placed in a consent agenda. All items placed in the consent agenda will be voted on in one motion. If separate discussion of an item is requested by any member of council, that item shall be removed and considered separately at the end of the regular meeting agenda. Do council members desire to remove any item from the consent agenda?
No, sir.
Then I will entertain a motion. Well, let me read what is on the consent agenda tonight. We have the approval of the minutes of the work session and regular meeting of August 24th, approval of transfer of already appropriated funds within the Capital Improvement Fund, the fiscal year 2025 budget calendar.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Robertson.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I will second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Kesker, please call the roll.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is the retirement certificate presentation for Chad Nestor.
Ooh.
And Chad is unable to join us tonight, but we would like to recognize Chad Nestor for his retirement from service to the city. Sergeant Nestor served with the city for 20 years from 2003 to 2023. During his tenure with the police department, he rose in rank from police officer to senior officer to master officer to sergeant. He also served as a member of the critical incident response team. Sergeant Nestor could not be here tonight, but we wish him well in his retirement. So let's give him a round of applause.
All right.
Thank you.
Nice.
All right. Brings us to the public hearing and consideration of a proposed extension of lease with TV6 Holdings LLC, which is otherwise known as SBA Communications Corporation, for wireless communications facility. Ms. Kaufman.
Sure. Jeff Johnson, Public Works Director, will provide a presentation before the public hearing.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's great to be here on the 3rd anniversary of my arrival here in Staunton.
Happy anniversary, Mr. Johnston.
Yeah, I just noticed that as I was looking at the date on my piece of paper. So back in 2014, the city leased some space on our water tower up at the Public Works facility to TV6W at the time for telecommunications equipment. They have since become TV6 Holdings LLC. That lease allows for 5 5-year extensions. So the first extension was executed in 2019, and in 2024, they would like to execute another one. So this will be another 5-year extension running from January 23rd of 2024 to January 22nd of 2029, as indicated in the initial lease. The first year's rent will be $10,657.75, and that will go up 4% each of the 5 years. So if there aren't any questions, in order to exercise that extension, we need to hold a public hearing.
I was going to ask you, what are we going to get in the third year for that?
More. We'll get more.
Like 4% more.
And a public hearing, and then if that's goes well, then an ordinance to extend the lease.
Do I have any questions from council? All right. I'm going to open up a public hearing for this matter as the time the council sets aside to hear from citizens about this specific topic. We ask that you please give your name, your address, keep your remarks at 5 minutes or less. When you reach the 5-minute mark, I will let you know that your time has expired. For any Zoom participants, please raise your hand now if you wish to speak on this item. Everybody ready? Public hearing is now open. Would anyone like to speak on this consideration of the proposed extension of lease with TV6 Holdings, LLC? Mr. Kessler, is anyone online?
No, sir. No one with their hands raised.
No one wishes to speak on this matter? Council, do you have any other questions? The public hearing is closed. I will now entertain a motion.
Go ahead. Mayor Claffey?
Yes, ma'am.
I move to adopt an ordinance as presented authorizing an extension of the lease between the city and TV6 Holdings, LLC for the second 5-year extension period as set forth in the ordinance, and further authorize the city manager to execute an amendment to the lease for such new 5-year term in a final form approved by the city attorney.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second. Just Terry Holmes.
Councilor Holmes seconds. Mr. Kessler, please call the roll.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Miss Edwards.
Aye.
Miss Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Brings us to item D, which is a presentation from Valley Community Service Board regarding the proposed Crisis Receiving Center and Crisis Stabilization Unit project. Ms. Call.
Sure. We'll have a presentation from Dr. McClanahan. She is the Executive Director of the Valley Community Services Board. Her team has developed the proposed plans for this Crisis Receiving Center and Crisis Stabilization Unit. They have recently submitted a $26 million grant request to the state to support this endeavor. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Good to see you.
So let me, just for people who may not know much about Valley Community Services Board, I would just want to take a minute to tell you who we are. And we are your friendly neighborhood, publicly funded behavioral health organization. And we serve Augusta and Highland counties, Waynesboro, and Staunton cities. We have been established since June of 1971. And that means we are 52 years old and probably the best kept secret around. By statute, CSBs, which are community service boards, are the single point of entry into publicly funded mental health. There are 40 CSBs across the Commonwealth, and they are divided into 5 regions. VCSB is in Region 1, and there are 8 other CSBs in Region 1. You can see the names of them up there. And we are considered to be a rural CSB with a medium-sized budget, about 22 to 24 million. This year's budget, FY24, is closer to the $25 million mark. So do I have the control here? This? Okay. See? Ah, there we go. So our mission is to provide, obviously, community-based behavioral health, developmental disability, and substance use services to you all and the surrounding localities. And in FY22, which is the latest data that we had when this PowerPoint was made, we served 5,689 unduplicated individuals from this catchment area, so the 4 localities, and 882 from across Virginia. So we served 6,500 people in FY22, and 1,809 of those were residents of Staunton. And I wanted to take a minute to thank you all for actually providing us with the 10% of funds that we asked you for this year. We really appreciated that. And I don't know if y'all know how much that was, but it was almost $250,000, and we really appreciate it. For those of you who may not know, Virginia law mandates the localities to provide 10% of the money that CSBs get from the state. So I write a letter every year and say, please give us money. This year, the funds that we received are actually going to be used towards the CRC CSU. So there we go. So I don't know about y'all, but mental health professionals love acronyms. So I'm going to give you a list. So a crisis receiving center. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. So a CSUD is a crisis stabilization detox unit. You may be familiar with ECOs, which are emergency custody orders, TDOs, which are temporary detention orders, which are usually the things that send people to a hospital for psychiatric care in a crisis. ED is emergency department. LEO is a law enforcement officer, and we're VCSB. DBHDS, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, is essentially our mothership. So while we are not employees of theirs, we do have a contractual relationship with them that is renewed on a yearly basis. And they tell us what to do. So a CRC is a 23-hour observation program, and this is to help consumers or clients, whatever individuals, to the point of stabilization where they won't have to go to the hospital. So for whatever reason, and I don't know the answer to this, a CRC can only be used for 23 hours and 59 minutes, at which point you have to do something. Send them home, send them to the CSU, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, send them to the hospital, send them to the ED, but something has to happen at that point. So a CSUD is a short term. It's generally 5 to 7 days, but it can be up to 15 days where a client can become stabilized in essentially an outpatient setting through assessment, treatment, medication. It's a step up from the CRC, maybe a step down from hospitalization. See how good I'm doing here? Going backwards. So the Commonwealth of Virginia has historically spent a lot of money on inpatient services and not so much on community-based services, whereas you'll see other states doing exactly the opposite. Virginia's trying to do a little bit better with that. So they're trying to have a comprehensive crisis continuum. So we have emergency services. VCSB does emergency services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There are limited crisis support services. You do have 24-hour telephone support. The new crisis support line, if you're not familiar with the number, is 988. So if you're in a psychiatric crisis, you don't have to call 911 anymore. You can call 988. You'll get immediate telephone answering, and they are able to pretty much manage a lot of those calls without having to dispatch a mobile unit or anything like that. So once you get into a crisis, you may have a regional mobile crisis, so our regional hub, if you will, is in Charlottesville, Region 10. And we were trying to set up a regional mobile crisis situation. That did not work very well. So the money's being sent out to those CSBs in the region who want to stand up a mobile crisis unit. And we chose to say yes. So we're working on getting that done. It's really a very important part of a CRC, a CSU to be able to do that. But what is missing? In the middle there, you're there and you're in the emergency department and then you're in the hospital. So what's missing, in my opinion, and many others who are much smarter than I, is that CRC CSU. How do you get people stabilized back home in their community, getting their services on an outpatient basis without having to go to the emergency department? And I am sure that if you don't hear anything else, you do hear a lot these days about the emergency department at Augusta Health and how it is filled with crisis patients. People with TDOs. Now, the problem with that is that our law enforcement professionals, our LEOs, who bring them in, have to stay with them until a bed's found. And beds are often not found right now for a number of reasons that we don't have time to get into. But LEOs may be in the ED with a crisis patient for 4 or 5 days. I heard a story recently at one of our meetings where a law enforcement officer told me he was in the ED with a teenager for 10 days. 10 days, folks. It's just unconscionable. I'm sorry. It's just not okay. So here's what we're proposing. 16 beds, both for, now the 23-hour observation or CRC is actually chairs. You don't get in a bed. It's more of it's more informal, and because but they will get treatment there in those 23 hours. And the plan is to have a building where you have both the CRC and the CSU, but they are in separate spaces. Okay, so they're not combined. And we would hope that there would be a dedicated drop-off space for first responders. We will accept TDOs. And obviously, we will also still be using the emergency department for those folks that are very fragile or that we can't handle, even though there will be medical staff on staff.
Is this for adults and juveniles?
We are primarily adults. We're hoping to have some space for juveniles, maybe a couple of chairs, maybe family rooms is kind of our fantasy about all this. So we want to do that and move to that. But initially it will be primarily adults.
Thank you.
So back in 2018, Augusta Health spearheaded a study about feasibility of, and they weren't actually talking about CRC at that time, but just the crisis stabilization unit. And some of you may have been involved in that or know about that. And what came out of it was, yes, we need it. We need it very badly. And I would say, and I was not in the state at that time, so I don't know what happened, but what I've heard happened is that there wasn't any money, or Augusta Health feared that they would end up with the whole ticket. And so anyway, it didn't go anyplace, but it was a great study that told us 5 years ago that we needed this in this area. So what do you have to do to operate CRC and CSU? In order to go with the national model, you have to accept all the referrals anywhere. There's no wrong door, anywhere, anyone, anytime. Medical clearance generally would not be needed prior to admission, although because that is something that the ED does. However, the CRC can accommodate and work with minor kinds of medical things. Mental health and substance use issues, and the ability to assess physical health and deliver care for minor challenges. And walk-in first responder drop-off options. So our LEOs would have a place where they can just bring them and drop them off and actually go about their business. Because in the CRC and CSU, there would be 24-hour security there. dedicated to that. So your general law enforcement officers who want to be out in the they want to help. I mean, we have lots trained in crisis intervention training, and they want to help, but they don't want to sit in an emergency department for 4 and 5 days. They want to get back on the road. Boy, I'm not so good at this, am I? I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. So we have to be staffed all the time, and you have to have psychiatry, nursing, licensed clinicians, and peer support specialists, and we have to be able to accept the referrals at least 90% of the time with no rejection for first responders. Obviously, screening for suicide and violence risk, and you have to do that. So in 2022, Augusta Health, they do every couple of years a community health needs assessment. And the last one was in 2022. 95 community stakeholders took the surveys and did all that. And the number one issue that came out was mental health, and number 5 was substance abuse. So that was pretty amazing. Boy, I am just going backwards here, folks. Okay, so these are the community health needs assessment results, just on a few things. So suicide per 100,000 in our area, obviously statistically significant beyond what you would expect. And there were not
an explanation for that.
I don't, and it's interesting because
22.7.
Yeah. I didn't actually, well, I have it with me if you want to see it, but Staunton didn't have any data. I don't know why. Waynesboro and Augusta County had data for this particular one. I don't have any idea why Staunton didn't. Do I know why? Goodness. 2022, I mean, we're looking at pandemic. We obviously continue to have lots of issues there, lots of issues around drug use, overdose, that kind of thing. And just.
Right. I just mean compared to the state.
Yes, I know. It is.
US.
It is. Yeah, that is astonishing. So, but we're better than the state and the United States on drug-induced deaths. So we're good there, or not good, but better. So cirrhosis of the liver, we're a little bit higher than United States and Virginia. And folks who are currently receiving help for mental or emotional problems, we're at 22.9%. We didn't have Virginia data, and you see the US. And then just adults diagnosed with depression, a lot of depression. So, depression can certainly be correlated with suicide. So if you've got 30% of your population, almost 30% of your population, severely depressed, that can lead to suicide, obviously. I'm going to make this go forward and not back. There we go. Okay, so why do we not want to put people at the ED in the hospital? Well, thank you. There's really the higher potential for incarceration. Lots of people who have a misdemeanor but have a mental health or substance use problem end up in jail as opposed to where they really should be getting help. The emergency department at Augusta Health is crowded all the time. And why do you send people to a expensive inpatient treatment when it's not necessary? And again, like I said earlier, our law enforcement officers are spending their time in EDs rather than performing the jobs for which they were trained. And in the ED, I mean, it's not their mission is not to treat people in crisis. Their mission is to treat physical problems. Right. So you don't get treatment there, which you would get immediately in a CRC, CSU. And they do work. Back as far as 1989, we see research data that says, yes, they do. In Virginia from 2020, these folks are saying, yep, it works. Research strongly suggests that a significant number of criminal justice emergency department diversions can take place in Virginia. And of course, aside from funding, there are a few roadblocks to making this type of critical service available. Now, let me say that this year, since we finally got a budget just recently, $58 million, which is not near enough, but we'll take what we can get, has been dedicated towards crisis receiving centers and crisis stabilization units. And we'll talk a little bit. I still have no idea what of that we might receive. So, but you can see that we do not have anybody who's really close. And you look at Harrisonburg, Rockingham, which is the closest, it only has 7 beds. And who do you serve? You serve your own people, right? Before you serve somebody from Staunton or Waynesboro or Augusta County. And then you're 40, 75, and 88 miles away. Obviously, our citizens in need are those who benefit the most. And we at VCSB, our Emergency Services Department, completed 742 TDOs in FY22, 61 a month. How many of those would have been appropriate to be served in a CRC CSU? Research suggests about 60%, that 60% of those could have been offloaded from the hospital into a less restrictive environment. Okay, so obviously law enforcement, Augusta Health, and the economy in a way will also benefit because this will create around 100 jobs for the area. And we could get into workforce issues, and we have them just like everybody else. So where we're going to find 100 people, I'm not quite sure right now, but you build it and they will come, right? We had an initial meeting with Staunton and Augusta County and Waynesboro back in March. And everybody kind of, some form of this presentation got presented there. And everybody talked about what are we going to do? There's no money. Of course, I don't know what we're going to do about money. But after that, the Department of Behavioral Health sent a call for proposals to CSBs wanting to do this. VCSB sent one. We submitted it June 15th. We still don't, and this PowerPoint was written before there was a budget. We don't know the outcome of a proposal at this point because we just don't know how they're going to divvy up those funds and what the competition is going to be for them. But if approved, these type of projects usually take a 24-month turnaround time. So yeah, 2025 sounds like a time for lots of things to be happening. We had a 27-page proposal. Our Augusta Health partners, who are much better at math than we are, did all of the sort of budgeting for us. Total capital cost estimated at $26 million. We're looking at 25,000 square foot building. Not all of that would be the CRC CSU. We would also bring in our mobile crisis team, our Marcus alert things, and our emergency services would all be in that building. But probably I'd say we visited a 12,000 square foot. We thought that was too small for us. So we'd probably use 15,000 square feet of that building for the CRC. So there you are, very expensive. This is what Augusta Health did for us. They did a very conservative estimate of where we could be in 5 years, over a 5-year period of time. You will see, and I'll talk a little bit about what money we have right now, but they've put that in where we have money. And if you look at the last 3 years, what you see is a little bit of a deficit, but what we would expect is that the DBHDS funds that you see 750,000 and 750,000, we would expect that to continue annually, which would obviously cover that deficit.
Can you slow down could you explain this one more time?
I can try.
Yeah, just because this is kind of the importance. This is the meat and potatoes right here, the dollar amounts. So you have 5 years, incremental cost, or you're putting money aside for 5 years. And you're seeing different revenue sources here?
Yes. So and I'm not going to be able to explain.
That's okay.
That's
okay. I just wanted to slow down.
Here's their assumptions. That's what they based their volume assumptions. So the number of people in a bed or in a chair, based upon their calculations of their ED visits as appropriate. So not your very severe people who need an ED, but those who might have been served. And then they looked at that. They also looked at people who were not in their ED, but who might come in. And to be conservative, they only took 40% of those visits to calculate the potential volume. So, but that increased incrementally each year. So, and if you want to read all that and understand it, again, like I said, our folks who are much better mathematicians
Yeah.
than I am. But so, and they base that on what's the Medicaid revenue, essentially, because that, although there is a push out there to get private insurers to do more with these kinds of things, but Medicaid revenue, I mean, there's a daily rate, a per diem rate, and they base those things on that. So, well, I wanted to go back the other way. There we go. So, there you see CRC days, you see CSU days, and they're how they incrementally put those through year 5. We would expect, I mean, number one, you're not, anything new is going to take some time, right? Because people are automatically going to go to the ED till they know that there's something else out there. So, and we'll talk a little bit about the funding. And there is the volume assumption as well with the CSUD. And if anybody really wants to get into this, I will grab our Augusta Health partners who can explain this better than I. But seriously, if anybody really wants to meet about that, that would be great. So currently we have $1 million from DBHDS through ARPA funds. These are funds that are available for us to use through December of 2024. It's complicated. The 1.5 million is allocated in state general funds for FY24, and that means that we think that they will annually come in. We've actually received the Department of Justice grant for $550,000 just yesterday. The locality match funds that we received were almost $700,000. Actually, the initial ask was for almost 900,000, but we will take what we can get. We're about to launch a 501c3, which obviously can be used for fundraising. We're looking for additional grants. I think there may be the potential for congressionally directed spending grants in FY25. And the hope for full funding or mostly full funding from DBHDS may be a bit too much, but they want one here. This is one of their priority places where they want a CRC CSU. But what we were told, we had a second kind of stakeholder meeting in July, I think. Anyway, and the representative from DBHDS said, yeah, we're going to help, but don't expect us to pay for the whole thing. We want skin in the game from you guys. And the localities have been granted a planning grant for the use of the opioid abatement funds. In other CSBs, they're using some of those funds to help do detox units and that sort of thing. So we hope to be able to maybe get into some of those. So even if we get this up and running tomorrow and get the money and break ground, 2025 is a long way away, and we've got lots of tired law enforcement officers. So what we're hoping to do now is to actually open another assessment site at our building where our emergency services department has room, so that there will be not full relief, but some relief from the emergency department, so that during the hours that it's open, law enforcement officers can bring people there. And we could see as many as 3 at a time, probably. And there would be security or law enforcement there all the time, full-time job. So we are working on that. The localities law enforcement folks are working on MOUs right now to get that done. So we hope that we'll get that up and running pretty soon to give a little bit of relief. So what's the big barrier? Of course, money, money, money. And staff will always, at this point, will be a barrier. I think there is lack of understanding regarding the need for with some people. And, we would like the community to be engaged. I'm just going to show you the letters of support that we got for our proposal. I think that's, if I could push this, there we go. And questions and answers. And I know I've taken up a bunch of your time. And
where do you anticipate the building eventually to be built? Will it be on Augusta Health property, or out there where your facility is?
Yeah.
What we are hoping is that Augusta Health hasn't offered any property, but there is property close to them. What we'd like to be is close so that back and forth works, you know, because initially they would probably be doing some of our labs and helping us out. We're looking at property there. We have not been successful in, what do I want to say, encouraging the owners of the property to sell to somebody who's going to be dealing with crisis patients. But we're still working on it. And we're looking, the sheriff of Augusta County would like to have it in Augusta County for jurisdictional reasons. But we're open to, if we're not really close to the hospital, then we want to be close to 64 and 81. So that corridor. But we are diligently looking at property and just aren't there yet.
Yeah.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you, Dr. Clance. A lot of information to take in there. All right, we have a consideration of a resolution of support for revenue sharing grant application to extend the Churchville Avenue streetscape from Albemarle Avenue to Thornrose Avenue. You're not going to
Yep.
From Old Lee High School, I believe that is. All right, what do we have there?
Rodney Rhodes, Senior Planner, will present this item.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Claffey, City Council members. It's a pleasure to be with you. As the mayor noted in this, in his opening statements about this is a request for support of a resolution for staff to apply for cost share VDOT funds to complete the streetscape along this section of Churchville. It's my understanding that the rest of Churchville from Albemarle out to Augusta Street was completed about in 2012, and that this block was in the original plans for a streetscape improvement. However, it was too costly. The original plans back then included daylighting of the stream underneath, I believe, that field there. And that was just too costly because of the retaining walls that would have to be constructed and all. So that the funds went to some other project, I believe, in the park. But staff is asking that the city council support of this resolution. This project includes the milling and repaving of the street, a new brick sidewalk, new street lights, additional landscaping, and the big thing is putting those overhead utilities underground. That is very, very costly. And by implementing the streetscape along this one block, it will complete and enhance pedestrian route from downtown along Central Avenue all the way to Gypsy Hill Park. The latest estimate on this project is approximately $2.2 million. And as I noted, this is a cost share program. So the city would be requesting $1.1 million approximately. And as far as the city's share, approximately $283,000 of it would come from matching, of the matching funds would come from the leftover funding from the Central Avenue streetscape project, with the remainder most likely coming from the new sidewalk reserve. And I would note that approximately a year ago, the city's chief financial officer, Jesse Moyers, came to me and said, we need to find a use for this funds from the Central Avenue project, and it needed to go to something that was comparable to that streetscape. So that's why we looked into completing this section of Churchville Avenue, and we included in the CIP. So this was adopted by City Council last year, and also it was in the Greenways plan that was approved by City Council in December of 2020. And now that it's in this CIP, it is eligible to apply for these funds. I'll be glad to take any questions you have at this time.
So what are there, 4 or 5 telephone poles?
Oh, twice that many.
Are there really?
Yes, sir. And I should note that this would be for both sides of Churchville Avenue.
I know, do they get hit very often?
Oh, when I lived on Churchville Avenue, yes.
Yeah, because they're right there.
Yeah.
Not right there.
Not right there on Churchville Avenue. Along where the.
Right there in front of the old high school.
Old high school. Okay.
Got that sidewalk right there.
Where you look at them, they're tore up.
Well, they are. It could be something done. They old and they look like they're get ready to bend over.
Okay, so those will be gone, is what you're saying.
That would be part of,
Yeah.
that's the most expensive part.
But is that,
of the project.
and that's sort of a policy going forward, is that whenever there's a work being done on sidewalks or roads, that utilities will be put underground, or this is just a plan?
I don't believe the city has a policy on that. This
Okay.
is for a particular grant application
Okay.
to do that.
Okay, I think it's great.
What's the timeline for, like, if this is approved, when would you say we start actually going forward?
I believe from reading the grant application that it would be funded in 27.
Now, this is something different besides this. So this right here, this project we're going to vote on today to move ahead. How about the streetscape, not the streetscape, but the sidewalks being established out on West Beverly Street? Is that moving forward?
Yes, ma'am. That's another project that's part of a repaving of West Beverly on that 1.8 miles from West Frederick Street to the city limits. And so there'll be a repaving of that, some ADA ramp improvements at, I believe, about a dozen intersections, and 600 feet of sidewalk from Grubert Avenue West, I believe, out to that, I'm not sure if it's still a Tasty Freeze, but that area that does not have any sidewalks on either side of the street.
So that project is moving forward?
Yes, that's something that actually will hopefully at your next meeting give you a little presentation on the proposed bicycle improvements along that stretch.
Good. You said you would take sidewalk funds to, would it be taking those funds away from other projects to do this, or?
When City Council adopts the capital improvement plan each year, there have been, I believe, $100,000 set in reserves for sidewalk improvements or new sidewalks. So that would come out of those funds. So they have not been designated for any specific project.
Further questions?
Not really. I mean, it seems like a good opportunity to grab a matching fund situation. This is sort of also a natural continuation of the project that we weren't quite able to finish before. And by the map, it ends right ahead of that somewhat terrifying intersection near the park, which we're going to think about later, right?
That's a VDOT project.
Yes, it is. But, so, I mean, it looks like we won't be putting anything very pretty over there that could get torn up as well. So, I mean, to me, this seems like just a great opportunity to help this area and grab the money while it's available.
If I could note, we stopped it just short of that, just because there could be some future improvements. However, we are proposing to remove one of the utility poles that goes around the corner there on the north side of Churchville, so that it would help with any future improvements at that intersection. So that's included in this grant application.
Good. Any further questions by council? I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, if I may. I move to adopt the resolution as presented, approving submittal of an application to the Virginia Department of Transportation for revenue sharing funds to pay for eligible costs of extending the streetscape along Churchville Avenue from Albemarle Avenue to Thorn Rose Avenue.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilor Robertson is second. Mr. Kester, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And now we have a consideration of a resolution approving an application to the Virginia Economic Development Partnership for a Virginia Brownsfield Restoration and Economic Redevelopment Assistance Fund remediation grant for the Arcadia project. Ms. Kaufman.
Billy Vaughn, Community and Economic Development Director, will present this item.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Claffey, Vice Mayor Darby, members of council. Could you pull up my 75 slide presentation, please?
Oh, the short one. Thank you.
That's part one.
I'll make this brief. In an attempt to continue their efforts to revitalize the former Dixie Theater, the Arcadia project plans to apply for a VEDP Brownfields grant to address any or identified environmental issues such as asbestos or lead paint that may be in the ceilings, walls, or floor within that building. The funds, as I said, will be a $50,000 grant. Match will be provided by the Arcadia project. There's no cash commitment from the city on this. The complete application, of course, is in your packet. Also attached is a resolution for your consideration of their request. Tonight, we do have Elaine Eccles, who's a grant coordinator for the Arcadia project. She's here in the audience to provide an overview if you need it, or simply address any specific technical questions you have about the project.
That was short.
Yes, sir. It sure was. Kylie wouldn't let me do a PowerPoint presentation.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Elaine Eccles, and as Billy told you, I'm working with the Arcadia project, and I work with them on a number of things, including grants and grant acquisition. So the first thing we want to do is to thank you for submitting our IRF grant application last June. As you know, DHCD announced that we were successful in late July. So we're here tonight to ask the council to authorize application for a Brownfields grant from the Virginia Brownfields Restoration and Economic Development Redevelopment Assistance Fund. Some of you may remember that in 2021, the city applied for a similar grant on our behalf to do some asbestos and lead paint remediation. We got the grant, you all got the grant for us, and we did the work that was necessary under that grant. We are now in the process of completing the final construction drawings so that we can advertise for contractors. And we're moving very quickly on this. It seems like forever, but right now that we've got money and we're a momentum behind this project, we are getting ready to go. So our architect is finishing up the plans, and he has identified several places that are in additional need of remediation, both for the asbestos contamination as well as some lead paint. We can show you all these things at a tour on October 21st between 9:30 and 11:30 a.m. And we welcome all of you all to come to that particular tour. After, as Billy said, after making the grant application, the city's only obligation would be to accept the grant money, pay the invoices, and then report our information back to DHCD at the end of the project. So we just ask for your support on this project, and I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from council? How much asbestos was removed on the last grant?
Quite a bit. And we've got a description in the grant application of what was done, but it was the friable ceiling plaster debris found above and on the ceiling tiles, all the contaminated ceiling plaster in the lobby, and the contaminated vinyl floor files and associated mastic. There was also some work that was done with the horizontal wall girts, but not enough of that was done. And so then we also, the last time around, there was demolition and remediation of several walls that were in contact with the asbestos-laden ceilings. We found out that we're going to have to put some electrical wiring through these places, many of these places. So we have to go back and do more remediation. The folks at the VBAF organization told us this is not uncommon for groups to ask for second and third grants to help with remediation, just because you find more as you are getting into these older buildings that had asbestos when they were constructed.
And how is the building coming along?
Well, it's not much different than the last time any of you all were there. If you've seen it all, the inside where everything's been removed, we're down to the bare walls. Mm-hmm. The construction drawings are coming right along. I think we've got about 3 more weeks before we finish those. And then we've got an advertisement we're ready to go out to get proposals for a contractor. We have interested contractors. The remediation has to be done before we can start any of the other work. And it should be done before March and potentially before the end of the year if we get the grant. Right. And they have money, so they've encouraged us to apply for this grant.
Good.
Wonderful.
Questions?
Yes, ma'am. I'll gladly entertain a motion.
I move to adopt a resolution approving the application to the Virginia Economic Development Partnership for Virginia Brownsfield Restoration and Economic Redevelopment Assistance Fund Remediation Grant, and to authorize the city manager or designee to sign and submit appropriate documents and to take such actions as she deems necessary in connection with the proposed grant application.
And a motion has been made. Is there a second?
I second.
Terry Holmes is second. Thank you. Mr. Kester.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, good deal.
Good luck.
Thank you for everything you do. That brings us to item G, which is a consideration of a resolution for an application to the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation for Rail Industrial Access Program funds for the Queen City Logistics Center, LLC.
Amanda DeMeo, Economic Development Specialist, will be providing this presentation.
Welcome. Thank you.
Mayor Claffey, Vice Mayor Darby, members of council, the item before you is in regards to a request for resolution of support for Queen City Logistics LLC, located at 600 Hayes Avenue, formerly the Livia Properties, if you're familiar with that. Their intent is to lease space to a facility requiring a new railroad track expansion. The tenant company is TriStar DEF, and they will receive inbound track shipments and distribute an alternative fluid to local pilot company stores in their efforts to reduce diesel emissions. The Department of Rail and Public Transportation has a grant program to support using rail as a more cost-effective, efficient, environmentally sustainable way to transport goods long distances. The estimated cost for the new track construction and repair at this property, which is industrially zoned, will be $430,000. The applicant is requesting a grant amount of $301,000. I want to confirm there is no match by the city. They are just required to have a resolution of support from the local governing body. I do have with us this evening Jim Vanderzee with Buckingham Branch Railroad and the property owner David Cruz Palmer, and they can answer any specific questions you may have about this project.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I have a question.
Good evening, council members.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Thank you.
My first question is, what is an alternative fluid?
So it's a diesel,
what is an alternative fluid?
It is diesel exhaust fluid, which I don't know the science behind it. It seems somewhat magical, but modern diesel engines inject it into the exhaust stream, and it somehow reduces the pollution that comes out of the exhaust pipe. Newer trucks are required to have this. You may have seen diesel trucks that have their tank that has where the diesel fluid goes in, and then there's another tank now that has a blue cap on it. That's diesel exhaust fluid. And so as the older trucks have been wearing out due to attrition, and newer trucks that have this requirement are demanding that, the demand for this diesel exhaust fluid is growing. And so hence the demand for this new facility.
Stuff is primarily urea. That's my understanding.
Right.
And it's just, it's hilarious to me because the old joke used to be, oh, you need more exhaust fluid. From mechanics, like pretending there was a fake like blinker fluid or whatever. So now, yeah.
But now it's a real.
But yeah, so now it's a real thing, and we're going to have a facility. So that's interesting.
Yep. And
so where is it dispensed?
So it's somewhere in the exhaust stream after combustion is where it actually is injected into the exhaust stream. So it's post combustion, it does something to the fumes that causes it to be less polluting.
But
that's about the extent of it.
But did you mean like, I know you can go to like Advance Auto, you can go to O'Reilly's, whatever, and buy the stuff. Whatever.
That's correct. That's correct. And they sell it in bulk at service stations. Okay. Pilot Flying J is this company that is going to be distributing to their stores along I-81 and I-64.
Well,
they're going to be hauling out tankers.
Tank trucks, correct.
And how many tankers do you get out of a
about 4 per rail car. So we're looking at about 800 truckloads per year, 200 rail cars per year coming into the facility.
So there's no specific date though that it's mandated that all trucks have to have.
I don't know the exact date, but it is mandated for all new trucks, and it was starting a few years ago.
All new trucks
okay. That are still running do not have it, but they're wearing out and having to be replaced with.
That's all right. Trucks. My 02 F-250 diesel still doing good.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's only got 85.
Keep it running, you're still okay.
Yeah. Is there a toxicity level to this this chemical?
It's non-hazardous.
Non-hazardous.
It's completely non-hazardous. So we don't. So we transload it at other locations. I'm sorry, I'm Jim Vandersee with the Buckingham Branch Railroad. We transferred at other locations on our railroad for the same purpose, and we don't even require spill containment for it because it's innocuous.
So this gentleman owns the tenant?
Yeah.
You're the tenant?
I'm the new Libby Welsh.
Okay, wonderful. You do it well.
You're boy, you got a reputation.
You
really
do. And have you been in this business long?
In the real estate business.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this was just your.
Yeah. So I own the property, and I've been in the real estate business for about 15 years. Yeah.
Any other questions from council? I'll accept the motion.
Sounds good.
There.
Yes, sir.
All right. I move to adopt the resolution. Oh, I have to make sure I do the right one here now. I move to adopt a resolution approving an application to the Virginia Economic Development Partnership for Virginia. Nope, I did it right there. I was one off. Yep. I move to adopt a resolution of support approving an application to the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation for an Industrial Access Railroad Tracks Program grant, and to authorize the city manager or her designee to sign and submit appropriate documents and to take such actions as she deems necessary in connection with the proposed grant application.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I have a second here from Terry
Holmes. Mr. Kesker.
Miss Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowwood.
Aye.
Miss Woods.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Something new for Stanton. That brings us to item H, which is an update on the City of Stanton's Community Development Block Grant Timeliness Workout Plan as mandated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Welcome. How are you tonight?
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. When we met to talk about the block grant in July, our consultant from M&L Associates mentioned to you all about the possibility of the timeliness requirement. So we received a letter on August 30th, from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that we were not in compliance with its timely expenditure requirement. HUD asked the city to prepare a workout plan to describe the steps that will be taken to finish outstanding projects before August 2024. This report, due to HUD for approval by September 30th, so Saturday, was actually submitted last Friday on September 22nd. And just to let you all know, we did receive an email from HUD on the 26th describing our workout plan as exceptional work. So we're glad to see that. Just want to go over for you all very quickly a little bit about why we got to the untimely expenditure, what we had been doing about it to deal with it, and then what we are planning to do between now and next August. I've been feeling this month as we did the report and planned things out a lot like the white rabbit on Alice in Wonderland running around, it's late, but now we've got a good plan and we feel really positive about the next steps that are going to happen. The reason that we had the untimely expenditure really started in the beginning because we started, the city started as an entitlement community in 2019. And the first 6 months of the 2019 program year were spent developing the policies and procedures required by HUD for entitlement communities. And I know I've mentioned this to you all before, but it's a very extremely bureaucratic program, and it's constantly amazing me at how many policies and procedures we actually have. At that time, additional staffing for the program was not authorized, and so the city's economic development staff had to assume the responsibility to implement the program. So they had to juggle that with all the other work that they were doing. In March 2020, and you all remember what happened in February 2020, Staunton received special COVID CDBG funding. So being a new community, they also then got additional funding that has the requirements of CDBG, but also its own set of COVID requirements. So staff had to put the other block grant activities on hold to focus on those shifted immediate needs produced by the pandemic. Currently, staff is administering 5 funding cycles, and that does not include the COVID funding. Also, during the pandemic, as you all remember, the pandemic forced nationwide delays on construction projects. In the city, that included the CDBG projects, the Rockaway Water Line, the Beverly Street Sidewalk Program, and Habitat for Humanity's A Street Aging in Place project were all put on hold. Renewing Homes of Greater Augusta, who's a subrecipient of the block grant, their ability to use the CDBG funds to make needed repairs stalled because the high-risk people that they serve, which are primarily elderly, were uncomfortable having strangers in their homes at the height of the pandemic. In the fall of 2022, the city did authorize funding for a new housing planner position. That position was occupied for approximately 6 months. Then there was a holding pattern after that person left. It wasn't until April 2023 that the city manager authorized the refilling of that position, which is me. I have been with the city since May, and my primary focus is administering the CDBG program. So those are all the reasons for the untimeliness, but we don't want to just stay there. We want to move forward. So some of the things we did already anticipating the untimeliness is we did move funds and reprogram them from slower moving projects, like the West Beverly Street project. We moved that funding to the Rockaway Water Line project. That project is now complete, and then also moved some of the funding to improvements to Montgomery Hall Park playground equipment, and that project is moving forward. Renewing Homes of Greater Augusta, the repair projects have picked up speed again, and they are currently working on 4 projects. So that work is getting done. Habitat for Humanity, the A Street project is also moving forward. They now have site control and are moving through the site development process. So those are the things we're already taking to prevent this from happening again next August. What we will be doing between October and next August to further us not having this issue again is we will continue to work with our subrecipient grantees. We will provide technical assistance and training to assist them in spending their funds in a timely manner. I will be nagging them and bothering them and calling them and checking on them. We have prepared a drawdown schedule for expenditures of all open CDBG projects. So every month we know which projects we need to request certain funds for, and we'll be working with city staff that are working on those projects or our subrecipients right now to know what's coming up between now and August. We also will be monitoring the expenditures every month just to make sure that we're on track. If we need to make adjustments or evaluate due to project being slower or something not as we planned, we'll be able to do that. We will be, and we'll let our subrecipients know if projects are not completed in a timely manner, they will be canceled and we'll reprogram funds. We're already looking at ideas for projects that would be easy to implement and spend the money before next August. So I'm glad to answer any questions any of you all might have.
I want to thank you for that wonderful report. And I was the one that got very upset when I heard we had HUD monies that we weren't spending. And
yes, well, nothing.
Now we have a plan, and
yes.
I really appreciate everything you and staff have done.
Thank you so much. We're glad to do it. Nothing makes a planner more upset than having to lose money. So we will not be doing that.
Thank you.
Okay,
excellent.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Come up here, please.
Outside of myself, that's probably the best hiring the city has done.
Agreed.
Rebecca. She's done an outstanding job. And as she said, our state rep said our timeliness report was outstanding. She and our consultant have done a great job. She's not only doing the stuff in-house, she's doing a lot of hand-holding for the nonprofits to help them move their work through the process.
Yeah,
she's done an outstanding job.
Well, that's great.
I praise her every day, and I'm thankful that there's finally someone in that position who's handling the HUD money properly.
Way to go. Yeah, way to go.
Fantastic.
Thank you all.
Thank
you. Well, that completes our regular agenda, I believe. We handled that already. And now we get matters from the city manager. And of course, I want to make mention that we have Amanda Kaufman over here filling in tonight for Leslie Beauregard, who is sick at home. And she was here during the work session, but she couldn't make it for the regular meeting. So Amanda's getting her baptism under fire. Mm-hmm. So she's done a great job. And I'll turn it over to you for matters from the city manager.
Just a couple comments today. First of all, the Friends of the Staunton Library are having their book sale next week. It'll be October 2nd through 6th at the Gypsy Hill Park Gymnasium. Monday night will be a preview for the Friends only, but starting on Tuesday at 9:30, the sale will be open to the public. It will run from 9:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Tuesday through Thursday, and Friday from 9 till noon. An update about the drought and voluntary restrictions. While our conservation efforts are having the desired effect of stabilizing our water supply, and despite the recent rain, water levels at the Staunton Dam are still below normal. So we are encouraging everyone to continue their water conservation efforts until normal seasonal changes refill the reservoir. We'll also post a reminder about this tomorrow on social media. At the last council meeting, during the public comment, a comment was made about traffic and speeding on West Beverly Street, where it slows to 15 miles per hour. Leslie has asked the PD to conduct another speed study to gather additional data. And lastly, we want to thank all city staff who worked so hard this weekend on Queen City Mischief and Magic. Police, fire and rescue, Parks and Rec, Public Works, and anybody else who was involved. We have a few fun facts to share, compliments of Public Works. 2 electronic message boards were displayed at numerous locations throughout the city. There was 1 portable light for the satellite parking area. Special pre-dawn trash collection on Saturday and Sunday mornings. Specially modified traffic signal timing along Lewis Street facilitated detoured traffic. 4 parking attendants made sure every available space in both Johnson and New Street garages were utilized, and both were completely full on Sunday. 25 personnel from across Public Works picked up trash and emptied the 81 trash cans that were in place. They hauled 800 trash bags to the refuse truck that they had staged on Middlebrook Road.
And they wore really cool t-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ministry of Public Works did a great job.
And then lastly, on Sunday evening, all the streets were swept and reopened. All trash cans were removed and all signals reset to their usual timing. Everything was back to normal in just over an hour.
That's awesome.
Crazy.
Can I ask one?
That is awesome.
You did good.
That is awesome.
One question, and Amanda, maybe I can direct it to Jeff. And you don't even have to come up here. Just I'm curious how much the big water main break affected the water or our water table. Was the rain we had pretty much a wash, or?
I can't really tell you.
Yeah.
The leak we found may have been leaking for months, and we didn't know it. There's really no way of knowing how much water we lost there.
Yeah.
I will say that when we checked the reservoir levels today, the rain gauge at the reservoir only registered just over 1/4 inch of rain in the last week. So the rain that we had here in the city didn't really
didn't make up there.
And then what did fall up there, the thirsty ground took a big chunk out of it before it got to the reservoir. So the conservation is working. We are holding our current level. It actually went up 1 inch in the last week.
Okay.
So we're holding our current level. If everyone keeps contributing, we'll get out of this just fine.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for filling in tonight. Again, thanks all the city employees for all the hard work they did. And it's awesome how mischief and magic got pulled off again.
Yep.
Even with bad weather, it still worked out.
Yep.
So at this point, we're going to have matters from the public. Is it time that council sets aside to hear from citizens and others on a wide variety of subjects? A copy of the Staunton City Council's Matter from the Public rule is available at the clerk's desk. Please come to the podium or begin your call, identify yourself, and complete your remarks within 5 minutes. Do we have anyone that wishes to speak this evening? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Constance Burge, 319 Mary Gray Lane. This is about brick sidewalks. Beautiful. But I'm an old lady and I was walking recently with a cane, which PT has helped, but they're very hard to walk on. They're very dangerous for high heels, for strollers, for canes, for walkers. And I am afraid from what I heard tonight that section in front of the old Lee High School from Albemarle to Thornrose, you're probably planning on putting brick sidewalks. I'm just imploring you to please, I don't know who decided whether it was this historic Staunton or who decided on brick sidewalks, but I just like you to reconsider. Almost every material for paving tends to heave up and down, but it's not very noticeable on concrete, but every brick becomes uneven. Now you're all young and you probably don't have any trouble walking, and you probably don't walk around as much as I do because I no longer drive, but I would just ask you to really consider no more brick sidewalks, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kester, we have anybody online?
Yes, we do.
Caller, go ahead.
This is Brenda Mead, 342 Sherwood Avenue. I just wanted to share a really positive story tonight. A couple of days ago, actually, September 26th, I posted something on a Facebook page, Staunton Staunton, VA, I think is what it's called, about a great experience I had with a local retailer. And I'll just read to you what I wrote. When we renovated the 1921 kitchen in our home, we bought our appliances from S&W on West Beverly in Staunton. Anytime we've had a problem, they've been there within hours. Last week, a leaky dishwasher needed a 1-inch gasket that can't be bought without buying a $400 part. Chris Sheets at S&W found the part in his inventory, took the 1-inch gasket out, and gave it to me for free. And I ended that with buy local. The extraordinary thing to me is that within 24 hours, 60 people wrote comments, and 555 people either clicked, the thumbs up or heart. There was not one single negative comment. Nobody disagreed, and I just think that that means that those folks do an extraordinary job out on West Beverly Street, and I think, and I just wanted to make sure folks knew about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Indeed. And kudos to Chris Sheets. He's a great guy. Anyone else wish to speak this evening? Mr. Kester, anybody else online?
No, sir. I have no one with their hands raised.
Wow, it's a quiet crowd tonight. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight, and I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Adjourned.
John, into the